started out, oh my gosh, I won't even say how many years ago in corporate travel, moving people. And so it gave me a really good extensive knowledge of the airline industry. And then about 8 years ago now, my partner got offered a job in Singapore and we had to relocate. And at that point, I had three dogs. And when we went through the relocation process, my husband's company paid for the pets to be moved, and I had no idea what was going on. At no point was I told any information. At no point did I understand what the process was. And when I finally got to Singapore, I said, this was crazy. This was a really crazy process that I was really unhappy about. And so I thought, if I can move humans, I must be able to move pets. And I literally, at that point, decided that's what I'm going to do. So I retrained whilst I was in Singapore. And I started helping people just on Facebook. It was just, this was my experience. This is what I'm trying to do. And from that point, it just basically grew organically. And then I was very, very lucky that I had an international schools group, an American international schools group, contact me and say, we would like you to help our teachers move across the world with their pets. And so it went from something quite small to something quite big quite quickly. And from that point on, we ended up having a lot of US clients to the point where we had grown to the point where we decided we would then go over to the US and we moved from Asia over to the US. So I've been very, very lucky that I've been able to experience a lot of different cultures and a lot of different ways of moving animals, I suppose. And I have actually a sister agent that is in Malaysia, so we work very, very closely together. But I've been in the US now for about 4 years, and we just basically grown organically. We work with lots of different people, lots of different backgrounds, lots of different budgets. And we're very lucky that we have got accreditations. We're part of the Animal Transport Association and also the IPATA, which is kind of the big group, which is the International Pet Air Travel Authority. And they're really, really knowledgeable. And we all keep up and we all know the most up-to-date information, which is really important because I think that's the main thing when we're moving pets. Actually, there's something that's come in very, very recently that kind of applies to Europe. So we're able to keep up to date all the time. So that's basically our background and kind of how we came about.
Okay, well, that's is a very interesting story. Sorry, Elaine, and the best businesses, I think, do kind of grow organically, don't they? Like you
I
start off
do.
filling a need that you didn't necessarily know was there, and then more people come along and find you. I'm just going to say to everybody, I know we're introducing ourselves in the chat. If you do have questions, it's best to put them in the Q&A. I will try and read them out to everybody as we go along. But if we don't get to them, that makes it much easier for me to send them to Elaine afterwards. Elaine, we've got a lot of different people here from different parts of the world, a lot of different pets, a lot of different plans for relocating to Portugal. Maybe we could do like a brief overview of what's involved in the pet process, and then we'll get into some more specific questions.
Absolutely. So what I'll do firstly is I'll start with the export requirements.
Mhm.
So effectively, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, the two fundamental things that every pet needs, whether it's a cat or a dog, they require an ISO compatible microchip. You'll know it's ISO compatible because it will be 15 digits long. So in Europe, they have been about for a long time. So, for example, if you had a pet from the UK that you had from, for example, I've got a border terrier who's 14 years old, his microchip is ISO compatible. Whereas the US, they were a little bit slower to convert. So, a lot of pets that were are kind of 9 or 10 years old, they might actually have a 9 digit microchip, which would need to be changed, and it would need to be upgraded. The reason that it needs to be upgraded to 15 digits is because it's effectively their passport. Their microchip is effectively the means of connecting them with all of their vaccinations. So every country in the world has a microchip reader, and having an ISO compatible microchip allows every country to be able to read it effectively. So every dog and every cat needs to have an ISO compatible microchip, and they also require a rabies vaccine. The rabies vaccine is an interesting one at the moment because in the US, they give either a 1, 2, or 3 year rabies vaccine. Now, if you have an ISO compatible microchip and your pet is vaccinated for rabies and your pet has been continually vaccinated for rabies, then you're absolutely fine. Your pet could travel on a 3 year rabies vaccine, it could travel on a 1 year rabies vaccine. However, if, for example, you had a puppy and your puppy is a year old, 18 months old, let's say your puppy is 18
Mhm.
months old, and your vet gave your puppy a 3 year rabies vaccine for its primary vaccine, it's actually only valid for a year in Europe. So we
Mm.
would then have to revaccinate your pet. So it's a bit of a complicated one to try and kind of understand, but effectively, your first primary vaccine must only be a year. If it's 3 years, then your pet would need to be revaccinated. If there's any lapse in that rabies vaccine, so I have a client at the moment, she has 2 cats. We're moving them over to Spain, and she forgot to have them vaccinated. So their vaccines were actually due last November, their boosters, and she forgot to do it. So we're now revaccinating the cats. When we're revaccinating, because there has been a lapse, we then have to allow an incubation period for that new vaccine. So that vaccine has been administered, and we're waiting 30 days before those cats are travelling. They're not due to travel until April anyway, so we had plenty of time. We knew what the situation was. But that's really the fundamental. If I say to owners, always check your vaccine records, always make sure that your rabies vaccines are up to date, because if there's any lapse at all, you need to get a new vaccine and you'll have to wait 30 days before they can travel. That actually used to be a bit sooner. We used to be able to move pets after 21 days incubation. However, they've extended it because there's a discrepancy between some of the US and other worldwide rabies vaccines on their manufacturer's guidelines. So now, as a matter of course, we're saying 30 days wait period before they can travel. So that's really the most important thing with regards to vaccinations. With dogs and cats, we also recommend having their yearly boosters. So the DHPPI for dogs and the FRVCP, sorry, for cats. It's not mandatory, but we always recommend it. We also recommend having tick, flea, and worming treatment. From my own personal experience, I've moved my pets 6 times internationally now. And they definitely, the critters definitely like fresh blood. So when we're moving them internationally, I always say if you can get a dose of tick, flea, and worming treatment in, I really would recommend it because, yeah, when they move to a new country, it's quite often that your pets might pick up ticks and fleas. So that's kind of the vaccine side. And if anybody kind of gets confused, then I can kind of go over it again. But effectively, to enter into Europe from a non-European country, you must have an ISO compatible microchip, you must have a valid rabies vaccine. So that's kind of the first part. Then the second part is the travel requirements. So the travel requirements are done in 2 steps. The first step is having the health check. So the health check can be conducted if you're in the US. They have rules with Europe where you can have the health check conducted up to 30 days before travel. And this is really, really good because if, like me, you get quite busy towards the end of before leaving, it just gives you a little bit of extra time to be able to get the pets sorted without getting stressed and getting rushed. So that health check can be done up to 30 days before travel. Then what happens is the international health certificate is filled out for Europe. It's called an EU Annex 4 health certificate. And that can be filled out. And then that gets uploaded to, if you're in America, the US Department of Agriculture. If you're somewhere like Canada, or if I'll touch upon those two first. If you're in America or Canada, it then goes for endorsement to your government body. And the endorsement has to be done within 10 days of the pet travel. And it must be a wet signature. So the way that it works in the US is we upload that document to the US Department of Agriculture. It gets printed off by that department. It gets a wet signature and a stamp, and it gets FedEx back. If it's Canada, for example, the vet fills out the paperwork, or we fill out the paperwork, depending on how we want to work it with the vet. They then take it to the Canadian Food Inspection Agent, and it gets stamped and signed. If, for example, you're in the UK, it's a different process. So in the UK, the way that it works is the health certificate is filled out, but every UK vet is effectively already endorsed. And so all that needs to be done in the UK is that it needs to be signed. That's literally it. It doesn't need to have a government body to do any kind of endorsement. Different countries have different regulations, but for the US, Canada, it has to go to a US government authority to be endorsed. The UK, it can be done just by a vet. So that's effectively what they need to travel with. So when the day of travel comes, depending on how they travel, you would need to have the health certificate, the rabies vaccine certificate, and that's basically the two documents that they need to travel with. So then we kind of touch upon the travel. So there's three different ways of traveling into Europe. The first is air. And with air, there are three different methods depending on the size and breed of your animal. So the first one is if they are small and they weigh less than 8 kilograms, you could take them in cabin with you. They have to fit certain requirements, crate size, and that crate has to go underneath the seat of the aircraft. The second is by having them with you still, but going as checked luggage. And this is effectively where your pet is treated exactly like a piece of checked luggage. So your pet would go to you with you to the airline check-in desk, you hand over the paperwork, they check, and then they'll send you to the oversized luggage area where you would then leave your pet, and then it gets taken and it gets loaded with all the other suitcases. And then on the other side in Portugal, when you go through, you collect your pet from the oversized luggage area, and then you take it for a vet inspection. There's a vet office just before you leave. I don't know if you've seen it, but in Lisbon, there's an office which is just before you go kind of down the slope and out of the exit. And that's where you must take your pet. And they'll check all of the paperwork. They'll scan your pet for their microchip, make sure that it coincides or coordinates, I should say, with the health certificate. And then they stamp it. You have to pay a very small amount of money. From memory, I think it's like 20, 30 euro. And then you're free to go. So those are two parts where they are with you. The last one, flying, is cargo, where your pet travels completely independently of you. And the cargo is a very, very different process to sending your pet as checked luggage. And there's a lot of misconceptions with this, a lot of misconceptions. So a lot of owners understandably get anxious when they're moving their pets. I think out of everything that we do when we're moving internationally, I think there's a certain amount of guilt that we feel when we're moving our pets. I genuinely know that that's how I felt how I felt when I first moved my pets. I felt really awful because I just thought I'm being really cruel, and is it the right thing to do? And when I went kind of online and I was reading up, Facebook, I had to come off of Facebook because there were just all these horror stories. And I thought, oh my gosh, my pet's going to die. My pet's going to die. And I had this real panic. Um, there are situations, there are bad press. And there have been situations where pets have, for example, been lost. When this happens, it's always related to pets that are traveling as checked luggage. Always. And the reason that it is because when you're sending your pet as checked luggage, they are literally treated like a piece of luggage. And that's why you're paying the price that you are. You're literally paying $500 to be able to add your pet to your luggage. So you're effectively handing over your pet and it is treated exactly like a piece of a suitcase. When you're moving your pet as cargo, the airlines have to adhere to very, very strict guidelines. There's something called the Live Animal Regulations book, and every airline has signed up to this. And in that book, lays out all of the restrictions that are upon an airline to make sure that they take care of pets the very best way they can. So we have a completely different process. We basically take the pets to the cargo offices where they're checked in, their paperwork is checked, they're weighed in, they're taken to a pet rest room. Sometimes this can be in the cargo building itself. Other times it can be within the offices. It's very dependent on the airline, but they are scanned at every point. So they have a special barcode that is related to their on their crate. Their microchip is continually scanned as well. So they are always being linked and they're sent. And then when they're sent, they're tracked the whole way. And I can track them as well. When I'm moving pets to Portugal, I tend to use Lufthansa or KLM. They are my go-to airlines. There's two reasons why I do this. The first reason is they have outstanding pet care. Their track record is phenomenal. The second reason, and this is a bit of a strange one, and some people might say, well, that's not quite what I would have thought. But the second reason is they both have pet hotels in their respective countries. So KLM would be their hub city would be Amsterdam. Lufthansa, the hub city is Frankfurt. So the way that I fly pets, for example, is Los Angeles over to Lisbon. That's where the end destination is. I'll fly the pets over to Frankfurt. They will stay overnight at the pet hotel in Frankfurt, and then they'll travel the following day over to Portugal. It works really, really well. And the reason it works really well is because it buys you, the owner, a day in Portugal to go and get your groceries, to go and sort your utilities, to go and sort your phone without the worry of your pets and having to leave your pets in a new environment by themselves. The second reason I really like it is because there is a vet on 24/7. So, as a prime example, I have four dogs. I have four dogs and a cat. My eldest dog is a border terrier and he's 14. And the last time he traveled was about 18 months ago. And Dougal is his name. And he doesn't have the best kidney function and he drinks a lot and he gets quite dehydrated. I purposefully flew Dougal on Lufthansa with my other dogs as cargo because when he arrived into Frankfurt, I had already given the airline, the information and the vet ahead of time that Dougal has not the best kidneys. So as soon as he arrived, the vet checked on him and said, oh yeah, he's a little bit dehydrated. I've given him a rehydration pack. We're monitoring him. We'll see how he is. If he's still not quite great tomorrow, we'll keep him an extra day and we'll fly him out when we know he's back to 100%. And that's exactly what happened. He perked up within a couple of hours. They monitored him. He flew out the following day, and it was as if he had never even traveled. He was fantastic. That's what I love about KLM and Lufthansa. They have pets that are basically they're being cared for 24/7 and there is no at any point there is no missing of the information, if that makes sense. They're always tracked. It works really, really well. And it's an interesting one when I say about the the getting there the day before, because a lot of owners are very anxious about their pets. And the one thing I say is that when you're moving your pets, they feed off of you. So if you're very anxious, your pet is going to be very anxious. So how can we alleviate your anxiety to make their trip as good as possible? And that's really why I say about having that overnight in either Amsterdam or in Frankfurt, because it just gives you that opportunity yourselves to get to where you need to be and just to get your luggage unpacked to kind of give you a little bit of time before your pets arrive. So as far as kind of commercial, that's how it works. You have the pet in cabin, you have the pet in hold or as checked luggage, and then you have pet as cargo. So that's kind of that section. The other way of flying, which I know is a very popular method for a lot of people, is as charter, where you are able to fly your pet with you on a private jet. This is an option that is becoming a lot more popular, and there's a couple of companies now that kind of provide a service. It's for me, I've tried in the past to bring people together. There's a Facebook group that specifically look at bringing other people together to do a charter. I found it incredibly stressful. I tried to do it, and I found that a lot of people made commitments, and then when we actually came to really putting down, yep, we need to put down a deposit, they all of a sudden disappeared. And that then threw the whole group out, and it was really, really hard for some clients because they had planned everything on a specific move date, and then all of a sudden, three people had dropped out, and that's $40,000 that you've got to try and find. And that's really the thing that I would say when we are trying to pull a charter together. I've done private charters for private clients before, but when we're doing a charter, trying to bring people together, I have to say you have to be very, very flexible with your dates. You have to be very flexible because if something comes up and somebody pulls out, you are going to need to change your dates. The other thing with the charter flight is if you are in a group with people who are arranging it, you are not purchasing a seat, you are purchasing part of the aircraft. And this is something that I always want to make people aware of because I think it catches a lot of people off guard. I'll give you an example. I know of I had a client that I helped just do the paperwork for a private charter. They managed to work it where they brought the flight together and everything went very well. But there was a lady who had two small dogs, and one of the dogs wasn't very well. And she knew that the one of the dogs wasn't very well, but she still took it on the flight. It's a bit of a funny story, but it's not. Um, one of her dogs had severe diarrhea on the aircraft. And they ended up having to land the aircraft, and hazmat suits had to come out and they had to clean the aircraft. It cost the lady $30,000 for the cleaning bill.
Wow.
$30,000. If your pet eats the seat, you are responsible for that seat. If your pet has severe diarrhea, then you are responsible for the cleaning. But equally, if something really untoward happens, let's say, the worst case scenario, somebody gets really, really ill on that aircraft and they have to divert the aircraft, you are liable for all of those fees. So the new airline, so the new airport that you're landing in, all of the airport fees, the having to fuel the aircraft, everything you are liable for. So you have to be really, really careful when you're pulling a group together yourself that you really understand what it is you're signing up for. If you go with one of the other companies, there's a couple of companies that I know of that will sell a seat. So they take the liability of the aircraft and they will just sell you a seat. And normally they fly from either LA or from the East Coast, New York. And the cost of the seats are anywhere between nine to $12,000. So if you have got one person and one large dog, then you can buy yourself a seat. If you have one person and two large dogs, they will want you to purchase two seats because your large dog, one will be able to be by your feet, but they'll need extra space. So they will make you purchase a seat if you've got two big dogs. And they basically they take the liability. However, there is no refund with that. If you make the commitment to flying on a certain date, they will take that money, and if you cannot make that flight, then you lose your money. Unless you can get insurances to cover you, you basically lose those costs. So it's just something to kind of be aware of effectively when you're doing a charter, that those are the pitfalls. Obviously, the fantastic part is that you can take your pet with you, and they'll be sat with you on the aircraft. So that's kind of the way of having a pet in the cabin with you. I get a lot of questions about taking pets as emotional support dogs. Doesn't exist anymore, and Europe are very, very strict. If you try and book on a European carrier and say that you have a support dog, but you don't have the supporting documentation to prove that your dog is a proper service animal, they will reject you. I had a client who had PTSD. She had trained her dog to be her support dog. She submitted all the paperwork to Lufthansa, and Lufthansa rejected because they said her dog didn't warrant, it didn't provide enough service to her during the flight to warrant them allowing it. It was a very, very large dog, and they said no. So unless you are basically blind or you have a really severe condition, then it's very, very difficult to get your pet on a commercial aircraft. It used to be very easy, but now they've really cracked down. It's really, really difficult. So that's just something also to kind of bear in mind. I know a lot of people try and kind of broach it, but I would say unless you have a real condition, like I said, that is your dog is properly trained and has all the certification, and you have a proper diagnosis, it's very, very difficult to take them in the aircraft now. So effectively, that's kind of the air travel. I hope I've covered enough off, and I've not gone on too much.
Definitely not, Elaine. We will get on to any other methods in a second, but there are a couple of questions about flying with pets and everything. So I thought I'd ask you those quickly, and then we'll jump on to the other ones. Let's see. First of all, do you know of airlines that permit you to travel with, this is for a cat in first or business class, or I guess a small animal as well? Can you choose which section of the plane you go into when you're traveling with a pet?
No, it's a bit of a difficult one at the moment. And again, the airlines seem to really be cracking down on actually the amount of pets that are allowed to travel on an aircraft. Delta are really, really good. Delta are my kind of go-to if I've got a client that I know wants to travel with their pet in cabin, because you can buy an extra seat. So effectively, you can take your pet in economy class, premium, but you can't take in business because they have the lie flat seats.
Oh, I see.
They basically don't allow pets to go underneath. So it's economy or premium. The one thing I would say, we do a lot of pet chaperones. And the one thing I would say is before COVID, they had a lot more aircraft. When COVID hit, the airlines took the opportunity to take out a lot of their stock or not renew a lot of the aircrafts. And so now the capacity is a lot higher than it used to be. So before COVID, I would chaperone a pet and I could be pretty guaranteed that I would have a spare seat next to me.
Mhm.
Now, when I chaperone a pet, I really don't have a seat next to me, and that pet has to go underneath the seat by my feet. The one thing I always say to clients is, you know your pet better than anybody else. How was your pet going to cope being underneath the seat and being in a small carrier? Cats are really funny. Cats are very different to how you would expect them to be. They actually like a lot of space. Some cats are fine. Some cats don't
Mhm.
have an issue with being in a small carrier, but others really do. And when they do, they get quite distressed. And having them in cabin under the seat in front of you actually sometimes isn't the best option. As an owner, you think it would be, you would think that that would be the best thing, but it can get quite stuffy down by people's feet. The air circulation actually isn't as good as you would want it to be. And so I would say if you've got a big dog that could just about fit into a pet carrier, from my own experience, it would be better to send them as cargo than it would be to have them in the cabin. And I know that probably sounds quite, oh, hang on a minute, but you've got to remember you can't let your pet out. Some airlines are so strict, and you never know the airline staff that you're going to get at the time. Um, they can be very strict to the point where they won't even let you undo the zipper of the carrier to put your hand in because they're so worried that the pet might escape. And that happened again, it's awful, but that happened on a flight. A dog escaped from the pet carrier because the owner unzipped it and it had severe diarrhea again down the alleyway. So, that's distressing for everybody on that aircraft. So the airline staff now are very strict. And also, you have to be careful that a lot of airlines now will only allow dogs or cats. They won't allow it to be mixed. So if you do want to take your pet, I say try and book it as far out, your flight as far out as you can, and get your pet added straight away so that you get that spot just in case.
Okay, that is really good advice, Elaine. Thank you for that. There are a few people asking how they can get in touch with you to discuss their situation more. So I'm just going to launch a little poll thing which people can fill in with their details, and then I'll pass that on to you. But I do have another question for you. This is about traveling with pet and cargo. Does the owner need to be on the same flight as the pet if the pet's going in cargo?
No. So with and this kind of aligns with the health certificate. So there's two types of health certificate. There's a commercial and there's a non-commercial movement. If you travel within 5 days of your pet, it's classed as a non-commercial movement. If you travel further, so I have one at the moment that the owner is actually going to visit family and they are going to be traveling 10 days in comparison to their pet. So I'm boarding their pet and then they'll be traveling 10 days later. At that point, it's a commercial movement. So as long as you travel within 5 days of your pet, you don't have to be on the same aircraft. And that's really the beauty of it. When you send them as cargo, they travel completely independently of you. You can use any airline you want, completely your choice, and you don't have to travel on the same day. So I have a lot of times, a lot of situations. I've got a client at the moment. He's moving to Portugal, but he has family in the UK. I'm picking up his pet on February 24th. I'm boarding his pet for 3 nights in the US. Then it's traveling via Europe, staying in Frankfurt at the pet hotel because you can get 2 nights included in your price of your flight. And that's something to say, actually. The pet hotel in Europe, in Amsterdam or Frankfurt, that's included in the freight price. So he's having 2 nights there, and then the pet's traveling over. So it works really well. It's very much about, again, like I said, it's not about, we're not a normal pet relocator. We won't make you fit with us. We'll fit with you. So how is your itinerary going to work best? How would it best fit together? Have a discussion with your partner, with your family, with your friends. What is it that it would work best? And then we basically make sure that we meet your needs. It's it's very much about working to the best itinerary for everybody. Because if the owners, like I said, if you've got things as an owner, you think, I really need 2 days in Portugal just to get everything sorted without the pets arriving, that's no problem. We can accommodate that.
Okay. When you say cargo, there's a couple of questions about sort of temperatures in their air circulation, that sort of thing. I assume we're not thinking like the same as a trunk of a car or anything like that. It is set up to be suitable for pets as well.
It is, and actually, that's part I should have touched upon. The difference between checked luggage, stroke in hold, that's the way that it's kind of,
Okay.
they're both the same thing, checked luggage in hold. When you've got it with a piece of literally just like your suitcases. it's it's not air conditioned, it's not temperature controlled. It's pressurized, but it's
Hmm.
not temperature controlled. And your pet effectively gets attached to the aircraft wall of where the luggage is, and then the luggage is then put around. And with cargo, there is a special pet area. And not every airline does this, but the majority of the airlines, they actually have like a gated area where the pets are then secured in this gated area. And then all of the consignments are then basically they are held down. So you have pallets that are put into the cargo section, and all of those pallets are strapped in to the base of the aircraft so they can't move around. But even if they did move around, you've got the gated area, so the pets are always protected. The air is circulated from the passenger part of the aircraft down into the cargo section of the aircraft. So you can kind of understand the temperature, and that's constantly circulated around. So that it's always pressurized, it's always air conditioned in cargo. In hold, it's only pressurized. It's not air conditioned. So if you're going up high and it's cold, those pets will be exposed to those cold temperatures.
Okay, and for those people that have pets that maybe don't get along with other pets very well, one person in the comment mentioned that her cat sings. So how do you deal with, what's going on underneath there and making sure that you're confident that they're going to be comfortable down there?
So this was a really interesting one. Whenever I talk to owners and I ask them, what's your biggest fear? Out of the whole process of your pet traveling, what's your biggest fear? They always say the noise of the aircraft. And the one thing that I was most surprised about when I first started in this business was the first pet I chaperoned was a cat, but I sent it as checked luggage. And I was really concerned, thinking, oh, the cat's it's not going to be very happy. It was a very vocal cat. And when I kept the cat with me for a long period of time before I actually had to hand it over. And when I got it back, it was like it had never traveled at all. And I was really surprised. So then when I did my first in-cabin chaperone, it was it was like the only way I can describe it is like having white noise for a baby. Pets just settle down. I've moved Newfoundlands, I've moved Labradors, I've moved pugs, I've moved British Bulldogs, I've moved snub-nosed cats, I've moved short-haired domestic cats. You name it, I have moved them in cabin. And I kid you not, they have all settled down. No matter what breed it is, they've settled down. The only exception to that is with cats when they are confined. They really don't like to be confined. So what I find with cats is I'll put them into a 28-inch crate. 28 inches is about 70 centimeters. It's quite a big crate. It's quite palatial. I've found from all of the ones that I've done that that is the best crate to transport them in because they have enough space where they can kind of move around, but it's not too big, so they don't feel overwhelmed by the environment. But the actual aircraft, what I try and do when I'm sending them as cargo is I will send dogs at night because their natural routine is to settle down at night time. So I normally plan a flight between 5 and 6 o'clock in the evening so that you can run your dogs, you can, they can have a really good day and have a very small meal in the morning. And then when they fly, effectively what happens is they get loaded onto the aircraft. It's very, very dimly lit. So it's not completely pitch black. The aircraft takes off, the pets settle down because they think, oh, it's nighttime, okay. They don't have the same concept of time that we do. I don't know if, kind of the people who are on the call will relate, but when I go out, if I leave my house for 5 minutes, I get the exact same reaction from my dogs than if I leave for 5 hours. And that's the same principle really for when I'm talking about them being in cargo or when they're traveling on the aircraft. They'll settle down, and if they wake up, it's still dark. They'll think to themselves, "Oh, okay, it still must be nighttime. I'll go back to sleep again." And they settle down, they go back to sleep. The real fundamental that I'll very quickly touch upon To have a positive experience moving your pet as cargo is to get them crate trained. Crate training is absolute key. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is because they will make that crate their den. And again, it doesn't matter whether it's a cat or a dog, they will make that crate their den. They'll put their scent into it. They'll make it somewhere safe and secure. So when they're traveling, if there's a few bumps or if there's a few loud noises, they've got that security of their crate. There was a story one time of a dog escaping from a crate, and it kind of caused uproar. That dog was actually a semi-wild dog. It was in Singapore. It was a big story in the news, and it had basically escaped from the crate because it hadn't been crate trained. This poor dog had absolutely no idea what was going on, semi-feral, and was put into this crate. So it was a fight or flight situation, and the dog escaped from the crate. I've never ever had a bad experience. Of all the clients that I've had, we have never had a bad experience of a pet in a crate that has been crate trained. And the best results of crate training are the most high anxiety pets. And again, a lot of owners think that almost contradictory. I don't want to put my pet in a crate. It's cruel because I'm keeping them confined. A totally different experience for your pet than what you think it is. Because naturally, animals will dig down and they will make themselves a den in a very confined area. And that's exactly what those crates replicate. I had a client, she was so lovely. She had two rescue dogs, a male and a female. And the male was incredibly protective of the female to the point where he went and bit the vet. And the owner was so distraught, and she said, Elaine, there's no way I can put these dogs in the crates. There's no way that these dogs are going to travel. This is going to be horrendous. What are we going to do? So I said to her, we're going to crate train. I said, it's going to take 6 weeks. We're going to crate train your dogs. It's not going to work. They've never been crate trained. This is going to be horrendous. This is my male dog is going to get so upset. And I said, no, we're going to start very slowly. We're going to build it up. She was so angry at me because the last week before she left to move internationally, her dog refused to sleep on her bed and he would only sleep in his crate. She said, you've lost me my bed buddy. She said, I cannot believe it. So it went from a real negative, oh my gosh, this is never going to work, to a negative of Elaine, the dog won't leave the crate. And the dogs traveled phenomenally well. And what we did as well was we put into place lots of strategies and we made everybody aware who was moving those dogs that they had to be kept together, that throughout the whole move process, their crates must be kept together. They must be facing each other. When we took them to the pet hotel, they transited in Germany. They were kept in a kennel together, further away from other dogs, so the smells and the noises weren't overwhelming. The more information that an owner can give me about their pet, the better. A lot of owners, if they've got very high anxiety pets, think, oh, I shouldn't say anything because I don't want them to not, be rejected. Completely the opposite. The more information you give to me, the better I can prepare everybody to make sure that your pet travels as safely and happily as possible because they're the absolute priority. As long as I know what their temperament is like, I can then tailor make a plan to make sure that everything is put into place so that everything goes really smoothly for those pets.
Okay, and there's a couple of questions then about whether you would recommend sedating a pet. Is that something the pet owners have asked you about in the past?
A lot, yeah.
Mhm.
So there's two types of recommendations that I give. The first is herbal, and
Mhm.
again, this is very country dependent. So when I'm in the US with my border terrier, he is an incredibly anxious dog. I give him CBD oil. There's lots of different types of CBD oil. So one might not best fit your dog. You have to kind of give it a try, and cats. But it is fantastic. For my border terrier personally, I went through like two different types before I got onto the third one that worked really well for him. But it was just brilliant. It was a revelation. So when the 4th of July comes up, or if we've got thunderstorms, that's what I give to him, and it works really, really well. So that's one recommendation. The other is you can give them something called gabapentin. Now, it's only very recently, about 18 months ago, it was endorsed by IATA that it was a safe medication to give to pets. It works very well for cats, and the dosage you don't want to give actually too much to cats because they can get quite spaced out on it. But it's basically an anti-anxiety drug, so it doesn't make them really droopy. It doesn't make them sedated. You don't want to sedate an animal because what happens when you go up high into the air with the pressure changing, their breathing slows down and their heart rate slows down. So if they're already sedated, their breathing is already restricted. And that's why we never sedate pets because it can cause major issues whilst they're in the air. But gabapentin, your vet can prescribe, anti-anxiety works very well as well.
Okay, fantastic. I think people are getting a lot of useful information here. In terms of sort of rough costs, I know this will vary. The cost between, say, the more checked luggage type option and the cargo option, is there like a major cost difference between those two? Or again, taking a pet into the cabin as well, I think was the
Yeah,
thing.
there really is. Cargo is the, I suppose, the elite.
Okay.
And it is a lot more expensive. And it will, 90% of airlines, you have to use a pet relocator to make the reservation. The reservation we put in, actually, that's another good point. The way that we do it is we make the flight reservation 2 weeks before the flight is due to depart. A lot of pet owners kind of get a bit worried about that and say, oh my gosh, that's not very long. But it stops other pet relocators block booking spaces. And then when they don't cancel, you can't get a space. So actually, it works very well. But yeah, there's a big price difference. So, for example, if you were to take, let's say, an Australian Shepherd, so a standard size, kind of mid-sized dog, as checked luggage, you would be talking on Lufthansa. I'll just keep relating to Lufthansa because it's kind of the
Mhm.
easiest. But you would effectively, with Lufthansa, be paying about $580 as checked luggage. If you were to take the same size dog as cargo, it would cost you around $4,000.
Okay, wow,
So
that's
it's
a big
basically
difference.
around four times the price. The reason for that is you have to, so we can basically move pets from anywhere. It's effectively from anywhere. I'm talking US prices because that's
Mhm.
kind of the best base to do it, but that would apply to the UK as well because there are lots of different elements that we have to put into place. So we have certified agents that check in at the airport. That's one cost. Then we have the air freight price. That's another cost. Then we have the customs clearance. When pets are traveling on their own, they have to be cleared through customs. So we have the customs clearance as well. But that's effectively an all-in price. So that's my fee, that's the check-in fee, the freight price, and the customs clearance on the other side. We offer like a door-to-door service, so pet collection and pet delivery in Portugal as well. And we also just do an airport to airport where you we would have a meet and greet service and you can drop your pet off at the airport and the same on the other side.
Okay, well, that is really helpful to know, particularly for people who are budgeting for this
Yeah.
big move. Let's see, I've got a couple of other sort of questions for you just on pets. So, assuming that, well, the first question then is, if someone had their pet, their dog or cat, and that's just what we focused on so far, already with the microchip, already with the up-to-date vaccines. Could they move? How quickly could they move to Portugal?
If you wanted to move as cargo,
Hmm.
uh, we can do it within a week.
Okay.
So we're very, very lucky that we have a very good relationship with, for example, I'll just keep touching upon America, but with it would be the same with the UK, it would be the same with Canada. Effectively we have enough time within a week to be able to get the health certificate done, endorsed, back to you, and make the cargo reservation, do the customs clearance, get everything in line. That would, yeah, a week. Ideally, we like to kind of start the process about 4 weeks before travel, making the vet appointment, having the health check, filling out the health certificate, etc. A month is ideal, but we can
Okay.
do it within a week.
And I assume the crate training is another thing to consider with the.
Exactly that, yes. And a lot of clients, if they've already got their pets in like a wire crate, the open
Mhm.
ones, it's very, very quick to be able to transition them into a an IATA crate. And really, you would only need a week to be able to transition between that and the IATA crate.
Now, assuming that everybody has done their vaccinations, and I'm guessing they're actually needed just to travel, does a pet still need to do a quarantine once they arrive in Portugal or within Europe?
No, no quarantine is required. The only time quarantine would be required is if you've not met that rabies requirement. If you're moving to Portugal from what's classed as a high risk rabies country, so let's take, for example, Kenya as a prime example. If you wanted to move your pet to Portugal from Kenya, you would have to have what's called a rabies RNet test or a titer test, which is
Hmm.
effectively checking their bloods to make sure that they don't have rabies, and you have to wait 3 months from when those bloods are drawn before you can move your pet over to Europe. If you're coming from a low risk rabies country, then effectively, as long as you've got that microchip and the rabies vaccine, no quarantine is required. When you are doing a pet move, whether it's cargo, whether it's checked luggage, whether it is charter, it really doesn't matter what it is. They must have a vet inspection upon arrival into Portugal. So the way that we work it is if we're supporting somebody who wants to take their pet with them. So I did this very recently. I had a client actually who was her husband was flying on a private charter and she was flying with her cat on a commercial, and we basically facilitated the health certificate for both of the pets and the vet inspection for her when she arrived in. So we basically advised the vet of we sent all of the documents ahead of time, and then when she arrived, she went over to the office, paid the €30, and had the vet inspection. But that's the most important thing with Portugal. You must have that vet inspection and have the stamp of approval to enter the country.
Okay, fantastic. Now we've mentioned cats and dogs quite a bit, and I know there's some people in the comments who have birds or who have smaller animals like guinea pigs. How does that work? Because I know there's a lot of information out there for dogs and cats. What about smaller animals?
So with birds, it's you've got to be very careful. I've got a bird at the moment that I'm moving that's a budgery, but it's a different variant of a budgery and it's not actually on the CITES list. So it's very straightforward. For rabbits, for hamsters, for birds, they have to have a health certificate, and we basically have to move them as cargo, and then when they enter the country they have to have the veterinary inspection as well. Depending on what animal it is, there may well be further requirements for home quarantine, but it would be home quarantine. So it's very dependent on what small animal it is. With birds, you have to be very, very careful. You have to make sure that they're not on the CITES list. If they are on the CITES list, then the process to move the bird is between 4 and 6 months. You have to get an export permit from whatever country you're leaving, and you have to get an import permit for Portugal for entering. And that is a lengthy process. So you really have to allow at least 4 months, 6 months ideally.
Okay. Um, Now, there's a couple of people from the UK in the chat, and being closer to Portugal, they have the option of driving there, taking the ferry. If someone was wanting to move from the UK to Portugal or Ireland to Portugal, any other country, what would be your recommendations for moving a pet over?
So we have a land transport agent that does
Mhm.
the route. So
Okay.
if you wanted to land transport it, then we could arrange that. It's a difficult one with land transport because it's kind of the research has shown that pets that are traveling a long distance by land actually can become quite stressed. So I had a client very recently who took the QM2 to the UK, and then he basically went across. We land transported him
Hmm.
across to Paris, and then he hired a car and he drove to Portugal. And he said it was really, really stressful because it was effectively 4 days that was just driving, staying, driving, staying. And he said,
Yeah.
and that was very stressful on all of them. So, what I would say is if you're thinking about doing land transport from the UK, just think about the practicalities because it is a long journey. Make sure that you've got the time to be able to break the journey up and that your pets have got enough rest
Hmm.
break between every day. So land transport is absolutely an option, but yeah, I would just say you've just got to plan the itinerary. We can also move them as cargo, and you can move them as checked luggage out of the UK. There's a big misconception about pets flying as checked luggage or in the cabin from with the UK. You cannot bring them into the UK as checked luggage or in cabin, but you can fly them out of the UK. So Iberia, prime example, you can use Iberia, you can use Tap Do It.
Hmm.
They would all Lufthansa KLM, they will all allow you to book your pet as checked luggage or in cabin to go over to Portugal.
Okay, fantastic. And then for those, you mentioned the QM2. I believe is that the only sort of ocean liner slash cruise ship that goes transatlantic and
It
allows
is.
pets.
Yes, it is. And I know that it's not as bad as it was. I know the wait list for a kennel was like a 2 year wait list. It was
Mhm.
absolutely crazy, but it's come down. I think now it's about 4 months wait list. So if you wanted to kind of explore that option, I would say you need to try and get a booking in kind of at least 6 months before you're looking to travel.
Okay, that one sounds like a lot more planning is needed. And
Yes.
in terms of, I know you said like the land travel can be difficult for pets. With
Yeah.
something like a boat where I know you get to visit them a couple of hours a day, but otherwise
Yeah.
they're alone. How would you say that compares to the sort of impact on an animal sent by land travel?
I would say with the boat, do you
Yeah,
mean?
with yeah.
Yeah. I've from the people that I've moved on the QM2, they've had a very positive experience. The
Okay.
pets are very well looked after. And actually another kind of misconception is that the health certificate isn't valid because when you have the health certificate endorsed, it's valid for 10 days. Going on the QM2 is basically 10 days.
Right.
So a lot of owners think, oh no, it's not going to be valid. No, 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 that's not the case. Effectively, you are in quarantine because you can't get off of the boat. It's just a direct ferry. That health certificate is then valid. So what we did with the client that we had go to Portugal before on the QM2 was he arrived into the UK, he overnighted in the UK. We
Hmm.
sent him to a vet to do the EU health certificate.
Yeah.
They literally did it there and then because we had pre-filled everything out. So it was literally a 10-minute visit. He had his new health certificate and then he went on to the Eurostar over to Europe. So it was a very straightforward process for him to be able to get into Europe.
Okay, that's good to know because I assume going into the UK and then into the EU would have a different set of regulations that could complicate things and make things quite difficult.
Yeah, no, very straightforward.
That I think that'll be good to know for anybody who's considering that option. Let's see what else. I know, we do have a lot of questions. I think we'll do our best to get through as many of them as possible, but a lot I will pass on to you afterwards, Elaine, and you can get back with in touch with people directly. So I think that'll be the easiest. Do you need permission? So do you need to notify Portugal that you're going to be moving there with pets in advance?
No, you just need to book you effectively you if you this is another one that people get very worried about. Your pet doesn't need a visa to go
Okay.
to any country in the world. It just needs to make sure that you meet the import requirements. So the import requirements for Portugal are to have the health certificate, the rabies vaccine, the microchip, and to have the vet inspection. So what I normally do is I will set up the vet inspection about a week before travel if it's going with the owner as checked luggage or in cabin. And if there are any changes, then we just notify the vet. But that's the only thing we need to do in advance
Hmm.
before the pet actually travels. Apart from that, nothing else needs to be done.
Okay, fantastic. Now we've got some people who have multiple pets. Some people are talking about having, 5 pets, maybe 10 pets, maybe more. Is there a limit on the number of pets that can travel with a single person?
Yes.
Okay.
So there are effectively 5 pets per person. So I moved a lady to Portugal last year. She had 13 pets. 2 of them were donkeys. So
Wow.
that was really
Okay.
interesting. She was really lovely. And the way that we worked it, it was her and her partner. And the way there's always grey areas. There's always grey areas. So for her, we did it as a non-commercial because a non-commercial movement is cheaper than a commercial movement because you don't get charged tax. So the way that we worked it for her was she had 5 pets, her
Hmm.
partner had 5 pets, and I had 2 pets. So
Okay.
I was actually part of the move, and we can work it so that we can do a non-commercial because a non-commercial movement of pets is the owner, a partner, or a nominated person. So you can nominate anybody. So for example, if you've got your I don't know, sister-in-law is coming with you. You could have 2 of the pets on your sister-in-law as well. It doesn't just have to be you. If you've got other people traveling, then we can basically split the health certificate. So you would effectively have 5 pets on one health certificate each. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
perfect.
Yeah.
That makes it good to know for those who have larger number of pets. Let's see what else we have here. With regards to sort of the pets that are going into cargo or into the sort of luggage area, there's some concerns that in the middle of winter and somewhere like the east coast of the US or the middle of summer, then that the tarmac might be very hot or very cold for them and uncomfortable. What happens in those conditions with pets? Do the airlines have preventative measures, or do they not fly at all at that time?
So if you were to use somebody like American Airlines, they
Hmm.
wouldn't fly them. They have
Hmm.
heat embargoes for exactly that reason. If you were to use somebody like KLM or Lufthansa, they have air-conditioned vehicles. So from the cargo, they transport them, they keep them in the air-conditioned vehicles, and they load them very last onto the aircraft. So they are never exposed to the outside elements. But if you are using somebody like Iberia as an example, American, British Airways, they don't have the same facilities in place. And so they would then have the temperature, so the maximum temperature that a pet can travel, or on the tarmac, like the outside temperature is 85 degrees, and the
Hmm.
lowest is 35 degrees. So
Okay.
yeah, when they're going as checked luggage, they can, as far as I am aware, I haven't had a pet that has been rejected for traveling as checked luggage because they have different requirements. They don't have to meet the same requirements. So if they're going as checked luggage, the temperature could be higher.
Okay. Now, we're talking a lot about moving to Portugal, and this trip for a lot of people and their pets will be like a once in a lifetime trip that they're going to do. They're going to settle in Portugal, and that's it. But there are those in, say the UK or say the US that are thinking about going backwards and forwards with their pets. How does that work? Is it a case of keeping your vaccines and everything up to date and then doing the same sort of trip in reverse, or is there more to it?
So I would always recommend as soon as you move to Europe, get a
Mhm.
European pet passport.
Okay.
The European pet passport is fantastic. The thing that you have to really be aware of, though, is you must only have European vaccines put into that pet passport. So, for example, you could move to Portugal, you could have a rabies vaccine put into Portugal, then you could travel to Spain and go, oh no, my rabies vaccine is just about to expire. I need to get another vaccine, and you could go to a Spanish vet and they could put in a vaccine, a rabies vaccine into that pet passport, it would be valid. You can then travel on that pet passport back and forth to the UK, to the US, to Ireland, wherever you want to go. That pet passport will then see you back. And all you need to do is go to the vet and have the vet sign there's a travel page in the pet passport. They just need to sign it to say the pet is fit to fly and you are good. That's literally all you need. If you took that pet passport back to the UK or back to the US and the rabies vaccine was about to expire and you went, oh, I need a new
Mhm.
rabies, and you had it done in the UK or the US or Canada or wherever, it would then invalidate that pet passport because the vaccine must be administered in Europe. But I always recommend it's such a great thing to have because if you are coming and going, having that passport will save you a lot of time and energy.
That is very practical. Yeah, thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense, and I think could save people a lot of hassle there. Let's see then. So, one person here has a Tibetan Mastiff, and a lot of carriers won't take that particular breed. What do you do when you come across airlines that don't take a particular breed for whatever reason? Do you have workarounds for this?
Lufthansa, always
Okay.
Lufthansa. They're just awesome, honestly. And that's one of the reasons why I really like them because you know you've got a really good airline when they will take every breed of dog because you know how well equipped they are. So Lufthansa will always take snub nose, they'll always take mastiffs, no issues whatsoever, but they always have to go as cargo. You couldn't take them as checked luggage. But they're brilliant. And with mastiffs, there's different types of crates. There's two different types of crates. There's the European crate, and it's a bit strange, but we basically call them the PP or the BBs. But you can get a really big crate called a PP 100. That's what I would recommend for the Mastiff.
Okay.
The other type of crates, which are more popular in the US, and I have them for my own dogs, are called Pet Mate crates. But they don't quite go up to the same length or height as the PP crates, but they're very durable and they're very, very good on cost. The BBPP crates, they're quite expensive. The PP 100, as an example, is about $800, whereas the Pet Mate crate, which is kind of the biggest size, is about $400. So there's quite a big difference. That's in the US and in Canada. In the UK, totally different. The price of crates is much, much cheaper. And the BB and the PP crates are the most popular, but you can pick up a big crate for like maybe £200. So a very, very big
Mhm.
disparity between prices of crates depending on where you're living.
And is it easy to know which size crate you should be getting?
Yeah, so when we talk to clients, we always
Mhm.
send them out a pet measurement guide, and you can find that online. If you do IATA animal crate measurement, it will bring it up. And effectively, the way that we work a crate to know what the size is we measure the dog's length from their nose to their bottom. We measure the from the floor to their elbow, and we measure from the floor to the top of their head, and we work out the calculations from that. But pretty much now, because we've been doing it for so long, if you said to me, for example, I've got a Cocker Spaniel, I'd say, okay, yeah, you need to be in a 36-inch crate. Or I've got a Labrador, okay, you need to be in a 48. We're quite quick. We kind of know the sizes
Mhm.
now. But that would be how we would work it out. We would make sure that we get the measurements of the dog. And yeah, we would basically tell them what size crate they need. Cats, as I said, I always recommend for cats a 28-inch crate. I'm currently moving a rabbit. A rabbit is going in a 28-inch crate as well. When I'm moving really small, so at the moment I've got a rabbit, a bird, and a guinea pig that I'm moving. The differences with the crates with that is that we have to, and actually with KLM as well, if we're moving cats with KLM, we have to mesh the crates. So if I'm moving birds, very small animals, or cats on certain airlines, we have to mesh it. And it's effectively, because of the size of the holes on the crate door, they can be a bit big. We basically put a much like chicken wire.
Hmm.
And we mesh it in to make sure that there's no way that the cats can either get their claws caught or rodents can escape.
Okay. And is it one crate per pet, or if you had okay, that answers.
Yeah, always. It didn't used to be. It used to be that you could have two of the same litter travel together
Mhm.
or two small cats. Now there is always separate. They always travel by themselves.
With medication, some people's pets will have medications that they're on maybe a daily basis, or I guess that's my first question. How do you deal with pets that have medications during the travel process?
So effectively, if they were to be travelling direct, then we would make sure that the owners administered it before they were checked in for
Hmm.
the flight. And on the other side, as soon as they're received, the medication would be given to them. If we're boarding the pets, then, or if they're transiting via Amsterdam or Frankfurt, then we ask the owner to write down exactly what the medication is, when the dosage is needed, and how much is needed. And we pre-warn everybody. So everybody who is involved in the
Hmm.
move will we pre-warn there is this medication. We must check that it's on the crate. And then when they get to wherever they need to go to, if it's the boarding will advise us the medication's been given. Frankfurt, Amsterdam, exactly the same. So everybody is well aware of what it is and knows what to do with it. That's really the key thing with the medication. It's just making sure that the owners give us the full information and then we'll administer as it's needed.
Okay, fantastic. So in this case, the owner would provide the medication and that would travel with the pet, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And do you have, for people who have pets on particular medication and they're living, in the US, for example, is it easy enough to assume that the same medications will be available in Portugal once they move there? Is there like a database they can check to see what's available and if there's an equivalent?
Pretty much, yes. What I always say to owners is make sure that you get at least a month's worth of medication ahead of your move so that when you get to Portugal and you go to your new vet, you can just explain exactly what it is, and then they will offer you either the same drug or an alternative which does the same thing.
Okay, that's really helpful. That makes a lot of sense. That's pretty much similar to humans, actually. Is the recommendation is always to
Yeah.
take about a month's worth if you can until you find your feet and get your equivalent prescription
That's
in
it.
Portugal.
And I would say that as well with dog food. I know that some dogs and cats are on very specific diets. What I would
Hmm.
say is if they've got quite sensitive stomachs, you can pack like 2 weeks, 3 weeks worth of food actually on top of the crate so you don't have to worry about taking it yourself. But then you basically, if you're transferring them onto a new kibble or whatever it is, you can basically transition so you can mix their food that they already have in with their new food so that it doesn't upset their stomach.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Very helpful tips there, Elaine. I think we're sort of coming to an end with all the questions. I think we've given people a very good overview. I certainly feel like I have a much better understanding of the process works. Is there anything else you'd like to add or say about Pet Relocation International as we wrap up, Elaine?
I think just to say, I know that it's really stressful, and that there's going to be a lot of things going on, and that it's all about just, I know it sounds a bit silly, but it's all about just taking it in your stride. And that's what we really try and do. We just try and help clients take everything in their stride. We're always available. If you want to WhatsApp us, email us, call us, it's really important that we build up that relationship and that whatever the situation is, you know that you can give us a call. And to discuss things. So that's really the main thing is just to say, it is going to be quite stressful, but we've always had really positive moves and it's 24, 48 hours and then it's all done.
Well, thank you so much, Elaine. There's a lot of people in the comments saying thank you to you. And I know a lot of people have filled out the form to get in touch with you. So I'll pass all that information over to you. But I think people have found this incredibly helpful and will hopefully be feeling a lot less stressed about this particular aspect of the move.